Welcome everybody. Welcome to our 9th trail chat at For Wild Places here. My name's Will. I'm based in Port Kembla, just south of Sydney on Dharawal land. And the first thing I want to do is pay our respects to elders past and present and acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. And on that note, I just want to take a quick pause because today is January 26 in Australia, which is a public holiday. But for Wild Places, we've chosen not to, we've chosen to work and not recognise that public holiday because there's a big debate going on here. And I just want to read something that we've prepared because I don't want to mess this up. So apologies, but just bear with me for something that Hillary and I just wrote up that we wanted to read out to explain why we're working today. Today is the Australia Day public holiday, but here at For Wild Places, we've chosen not to observe the public holiday as we believe it's not a date to celebrate. We've listened to our First Nations communities and hear their calls for justice, truth, treaty, and reconciliation. January 26 actually marks the date the British landed and proclaimed sovereignty over the eastern seaboard of Australia. They proclaimed Australia terra nullius, unoccupied land that was theirs to steal. 237 years later, sovereignty still has not been ceded. We don't believe in celebrating the dispossession, violence, and genocide on what is supposed to be a day that celebrates national unity. Instead, we recognise the strength First Nations people have shown in enduring colonisation and the care they've shown to country, in celebrating and protecting the traditional plants, animals, and places we love to explore. As Australians, we're incredibly lucky to live on a continent that has over 10,000 years of law, wisdom, culture, stories, and strength. We recognise today as Invasion Day, and today and every day commit to doing more through listening, learning, and educating ourselves so we can be better allies to our First Peoples. We know that Australia is not alone in our bloody history of colonialism, and we extend our respects to all First Nations people across the world that have been dispossessed. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Thanks for that, folks. That just explains a bit of context on why we're not down at the beach today and celebrating. This is not a day to celebrate. And Hillary's wearing an excellent t-shirt there. Good one. All right, now on to today's trail chat. I think I introduced myself. My name's Will. I'm based in Port Kembla. I work with For Wild Places. Today, we're incredibly stoked to have with us as special guest, Boulder-based athlete, environmental and social justice advocate, marine scientist with a PhD in marine biology. So I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've interviewed a doctor. It's very exciting. Please give a big welcome to Peyton Thomas. Thanks for coming, Peyton.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
Excellent. Now, look, these chats are pretty chill, Peyton. We usually have a few questions back and forth, and then if anyone else has some questions, we open it up a bit later. The first thing I wanted to ask you is, how are you going and what have you been up to?
I'm doing pretty well. Today's been a bit crazy, just really busy, lots of meetings. I actually, so I'm a postdoctoral research associate at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And basically, because I'm considered a faculty member, I can take free classes through the university, which is pretty awesome. So last week, I decided to sign up for a bunch of different classes and see what I wasn't going to be on a wait list for, because you sign up after everyone else does. And so I got a notification on Monday that I got into this hip hop class. So I had my first hip hop class today. And that was really fun and like not something I expected of my new schedule as a research scientist, but that's what I'm doing. So yeah.
Next time we intro you, I'll add hip hop student into the
yeah. Studying to become a professional hip hop dancer. Definitely far from that, but yeah, that was really fun. And yeah, just a day full of running and work, and I'm doing pretty well.
Awesome. What does a day full of running usually mean?
Well, not all full of running, but it's usually I run somewhere in the really beautiful foothills or mountains here in Boulder, in the morning, or usually in the afternoon lately in the winter, because I can't handle cold weather just yet. So I try to find the warmest part of the day and do that because yes, still adjusting. But yeah, I feel really lucky to have moved to Boulder and sort of have like a really awesome playground. And it's like really cool because you see people all the time, like literally anywhere on the trails. So it's pretty awesome to see.
Yeah. What got you into trail running, Peyton? Because I know like you're an awesome athlete on track. I know you went to the Olympic trials a few years ago, which I feel like we could dedicate a whole trail chat to. But what won you to the trails?
Um, let's see. Well, I think, I mean, I did the whole like high school to college running pipeline, I guess is what you could say. So like running cross country and track in high school, and then moving into college cross country and track. And um, I think I just like wanted to explore trail running more, especially coming from a cross country background, like that training for cross country was the way that I got into running on trails in the first place, because you do a lot of your training runs and different types of terrain. And so I basically just pursued it after college from there, not immediately, because I didn't realize that that was like an actual sport that people do until like a year or two after college. I was like, oh, people actually race in this setting, and that sounds awesome. And I like running is one of my favorite ways to enjoy nature and see different places and landscapes. So it was just sort of a natural transition for me. And it doesn't require a lot of gear. And I just love the idea of like human powered movement and there's like an innate connection I feel like you have when you're running through different places. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, on that, I wanted to ask. I forget where I think I might have heard you say it on a podcast or read it on a website or something, but you've said, I want to do good in this world, and science and running is my means of doing so. And I also saw you say somewhere that in running, protecting the environment shouldn't even be a thing, like it should just be a given. We're a trail running group that want to, like, we're an activist running group. We want to protect the places we love. And always keen to hear other people's. That's why we're stoked to have you on us to chat. But always keen to hear how other people express this, or what we can learn. So I know this is a big question, sorry, but like that quote, I want to do good, and running and science is my way to do it. How did you come to that conclusion, and how do you think we can get more runners to come to that conclusion?
Yeah, I think because I spend most of my time either running or like my career is in science, it is the most obvious way for me to sort of give back to places that I experience. And like we're all a part of the environment as well. And I think that running is one of these ways in particular where you're truly having an actual feedback with the environment, whether you realize it or not. And my dear friend Connor Ryan, who's a Patagonia ski ambassador, he says this really well. Just that you're in reciprocity with the environment, because when you think about when you're breathing out, you're expelling CO2, and what is going to take up that CO2? The plants and vegetation around you. You're in like constant feedback with this, like with these beautiful landscapes. And I really love that. And I think that that resonates really well with, I mean, especially with running, but really in everything that we do, we're in constant reciprocity. So it seems sort of innate that we should care about the places that we run through or live in or work in. And then as far as the science goes, I think just thinking back to me being a child, I've always been a very curious person. And I've always wanted to like learn more about the environment and different animals and all these things. And I think for me, just knowing that my particular field that I'm interested in has nothing to do with like business or marketing. Like, I don't think I would last in any other um, field besides science or anything related to environmental conservation. That just feels like my lane, and I've just always been very interested in that. But there are other ways where we can apply all of our career fields to protecting the environment and protecting what we love and protecting each other. Because ultimately that's what we're talking about when we're talking about protecting the environment, is we're trying to protect each other, whether that means our local communities or our global society, again, because of that reciprocity that we have.
Love it. Actually, that reminds me of another thing you said that I wanted to ask you about. You said, in a way, everyone is a scientist. Sorry if I'm throwing quotes out that you don't remember that.
No, I remember that one.
Yeah, that just stuck with me. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think that like having scientists be a term is sort of intimidating to a lot of people, because a lot of people think that it is something that you have to go through several educational steps to get to the process of being this supposed scientist. But in reality, like, all that a scientist means is that you're a person that is observing your world around you. And everyone is doing that on a daily basis. Everyone is observing, like making very different observations and taking note. That's like how we inform ourselves about like what's going to happen next with the weather. Should I wear a jacket today? Should I not? Should I go see this person? Should I not? Like, we're informing a lot of our decisions based off of our observations of the world around us. And so I think in that way, everyone should consider themselves a scientist, because we're all observing very different things. And that goes back to like things that are really important when we think about climate change impacts or different pollution impacts. We're all observing and experiencing different things that are all very valid, and should all be brought to the table.
Cool. How so you've got a PhD in marine biology, you're a professional runner. How do you balance your life? That seems crazy.
I do not do a good job. Every day, like, what is happening? Yeah. Luckily, my sponsors on the professional running side are not like they're not asking that much of me, so that's good. So it's more so like demanding on the marine biology and science side. But yeah, definitely like balancing the training and figuring out race schedules and all of that with my scientific work is pretty tough. And I think yeah, I don't really think I don't know if I balance it very well, to be honest, but I'm trying my best. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's so hard. I actually I might lean on the science a bit, because I was thinking about here. Well, for me and in For Wild Places, I have these beautiful areas to run, and the local impacts of things like even things like invasive weeds or deforestation, or like some of these things are very tangible to me and in my face in my local area. But it's actually harder to articulate the bigger picture stuff like climate. So I wanted to ask you, and again, apologies for a big question on the spot, but I wondered if you could talk to us a bit about how climate change is impacting the places we love to run.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think, I mean, we all run in very different places, right? Like, we're just running wherever we live usually. And I think I've had personally experiences in a variety of different places where I've seen firsthand a lot of climate impacts, in terms of like, mostly in terms of like major natural disasters that have happened. So before I lived in Boulder, I was living in North Carolina, in a town called Wilmington. And pretty much every year it's on the trajectory for a hurricane, which is really unfortunate. It's just like this hotspot. And there are some pretty tangible climate impacts in terms of hurricanes, like how hard hit these hurricanes are hitting places now, and they're happening pretty much every year, every other year, not necessarily increasing in intensity, but increasing in duration. Like they will be slower going and essentially dump more rain. So it's causing more flooding impacts and more sea level rise. And a lot of the communities that live in these areas are not very wealthy. So you're also seeing a lot of like infrastructure damage and people who can't, like, don't have the means to move away or live. But when it comes to like climate impacts on my running, when I was there, the direct impact that I saw was I couldn't run on the trails that I would run on like every single day. So there was this one hurricane that hit in 2018 that not only wiped out my graduate school project, but it decimated trail systems in the Wilmington area for about a couple months. But then if you went out to farther reaching areas where people didn't access those places as much, but are larger trail systems, like there's this one place called the Croatan National Forest, in particular, where there's this really beautiful 20-mile loop trail, like literally the longest trail you could find in coastal North Carolina, which is sort of crazy. And you couldn't access like half of the trail for probably 2 years, at least 2 years, because tons of the trail had been decimated by a bunch of debris and flooding, and you couldn't find the trail anymore. And so things like that not only impact you just in your day-to-day living, but like that was one of the places that I would go when I didn't want to drive, 5-6 hours to the mountains to go on a long trail run, where I could just go right up the road to this beautiful trail system. And now I couldn't do that anymore. And so that would impact training. And then people backpack on those trails too. Like it's a multi-use thing. So not only for running. But I've seen impacts there, and people like out in the West where I live here in Boulder see impacts all the time with wildfires that have happened, where if a wildfire happens on a certain peak, that completely closes trail systems in that area for who knows how long. Some really devastating fires happened here last year, and there's a trail system in South Boulder, like the Marshall Mesa area, that was shut down for a really long time. And so I know that affected a lot of people, and not to mention like people's homes are burning. And so like running and trail running on that end is a very minimal loss, I think, compared to like losing infrastructure. But yeah, I think we can see a lot of ways where changes in different weather patterns, like even in California, like a month ago, or 2 months ago, was experiencing a ton of flooding and mudslides. So people can't access trail systems there, and it's impacting roads. I think we can find a lot of ways where we see these climate impacts happening, and how they are affecting our lives and the decisions that we make.
I can't remember why, but I had a ridiculous conversation with my neighbor the other day about the Californian energy system. I don't know how we got onto talking about something halfway across the world, but he was blaming renewable energy for the crisis. And I don't know that much about it, but I was suggesting maybe it had something to do also with the climate crisis and the wildfires and the impacts on transmission lines and stuff. And anyway, it was rather frustrating, but you just made me think of it then. But I guess that's a pretty common thing happening everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure like you all can think of similar things that are happening in Australia and the ways that that impacts your running in your lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Wildfires flooding, like yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to resist going down a vent. I was thinking, try and stay on track. I, wa- I wanted to ask you, Peyton.
This is a safe space
Um,
if you want to vent.
I won't. Yeah, no, I better not. I did want to ask you. I feel like the ocean is this epic space sitting on our doorstep. Well, for me, I'm lucky enough to live right here, but it doesn't really get talked about much in terms of climate change, or maybe not enough. But again, I wondered if you could explain to us the importance of the ocean in climate change, or
Yeah. Oh,
the impact. Do you know what I mean? Like the role that like the oceans and the changing oceans plays in climate change. I don't know if that makes sense.
yeah. So since the ocean is so vast, since it covers, 70% of our Earth, it's also directly coupled with atmospheric changes. So any atmospheric change that is happening is ultimately going to impact the ocean because it's so big and it modulates a lot of the environments that we have in all these different places. Um, and the way that, like, basically, we don't know a lot of the large scale impacts that are happening to the oceans because it's so big. But what we have been tracking in terms of like climate change impacts on smaller scales, whether that's ocean basin level or we have all these crazy climate models that I don't fully understand. I shouldn't even say fully understand. I just take the layman's summary of what people are trying to tell me. But basically is that overall across the board, our oceans are warming, and there are a lot of implications for that. And ocean warming isn't the only thing that is happening. There's also ocean acidification that's happening. There's also oh my gosh. In certain places, there's actually increasing freshwater inputs into oceans because of increasing precipitation in inland areas. And that's causing basically an imbalance in a lot of these coastal ecosystems and creating a different gradient in these coastal ecosystems. And we're seeing changes to different currents. Like there are so many things happening in the ocean that I think for a lot of people is really hard to grasp and very difficult for me to grasp as well, because our minds just want to be able to tackle one thing at a time, where we're faced with this problem where we have to sort of have a bunch of different solutions to tackle all of these different problems. It's not going to be one singular thing. But yeah, I think when I usually think about climate change impacts to the oceans, because I am more biologically focused, I am really more so interested in things that are going to happen to biodiversity, different animals and plants, and bacteria, microbes, like all the things that live in these really unknown waters, and what that is going to mean for like large scale ocean functioning in the future is more so the thing that I think about on a day-to-day basis. And the answer to, I guess, that semi question is that like no one really knows, and that we need to figure a lot of things out really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a very positive answer to your question. But yeah, there are a lot of impacts happening on the oceans right now. But I also think that there are a lot of opportunities for people to like help in a bunch of different small ways, because yeah, thinking about all of these impacts at these large scales is really daunting and not digestible at all, and will basically just shut your brain off.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really scary. But we have to talk about it to understand it in order to do something. So yeah, this is really, really, really helpful. I actually did have a few more questions, Peyton, but before I do that, Just wondered if anyone else had questions for Peyton. Shane.
Shane.
Hi, Peyton. I'm wondering what's the intersection between a true alpine town like Boulder and marine biology, because it's not necessarily clear that there's a link there.
It's definitely not very clear. But I have met other marine biologists in Boulder, so I'm definitely not alone. I found a little niche. But I guess just in terms of like generally connecting mountains or alpine systems to oceans, like, I mean, we have these really beautiful watersheds that essentially start in high alpine areas. And just thinking about all the different ecosystems that water will pass through to get to the oceans. And that's like basically why oceans exist, why rivers exist, why these beautiful high alpine areas exist, is because of this innate connection. And then there's like a bunch of atmospheric things that are happening in between all this that I can't talk about at all. But there is a connection. You just have to think about basically all of these ecosystems in tandem functioning together, which is, I think, a cool way to think about connecting mountains to oceans. And there was like a trail work event that I helped with during the Hard Rock 100 this year. And we were talking to this one woman who works for the San Juan Mountain Association, which is this little nonprofit that does a bunch of trail maintenance in the San Juan Mountains in Colorado. And the woman was like, yeah, every single day I meet new forest users, like new people who are visiting these mountains. And when we're going through these trail work intros, or like I see people recreating, I always remind them, like, things that you put in the water go somewhere. Things that you do up here in these high alpine areas ultimately affect everything downstream. And so I think it's really important to think about it in that context. Like, we are all interconnected in some way, and we all have an effect on each other. And I think that that's like really cool. And also that I sort of get to exist in both of these spaces is really awesome. And then I like thinking about running challenges to run from like a high alpine area down to the coast. Anywhere, that would be really fun.
Awesome.
Did I answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Sometimes I go off on tangents.
There's an event in Australia called Coast to Kosciuszko where you run from the coast in Eden. I think it's about 200 and something kilometres to Australia, the peak of Australia's highest mountain, which is a cool one.
Oh.
It's all on road though, or most of it. So.
Oh, dang. That sounds brutal. Oh my gosh.
I've got a kind of follow-up question to Shane's question. Like, are you I guess you're probably a bit of both, but like, I find it hard because I love mountains and that, but I'm also an ocean person. And like, in terms of like where you spend your time, and often that comes through where you live, because that's where you spend the most time. But how do you find, like, you know, you've recently moved to Boulder and you were on the coast before that, but like, you know, how do you kind of, I guess, find the balance between those two things? And, you know, especially through running and being able to explore different places and getting your fix of the ocean and water, being like a water person as much as you are a mountain and kind of forest person.
Yeah, I've actually really been struggling with that since I moved here. Because I'm so used to just having warm water nearby, because there is water here. There's not that much, but the water that is here is very cold, and I am just not a cold water like river person yet. So I have really been struggling with that. I think where I'm finding, like for me, I think I'm still in this phase of like, wow, I actually get to live in these mountains because I've never had that experience before. But to get my ocean fix, I went to Mexico in December So that was fun. So I just did that. And I think I'm just gonna try to go visit coastal places as much as I can. But yeah, it's really hard. And I don't know if I'll be in Boulder forever, but definitely wherever I would choose next, I would love to have a mix of both, because that is really hard to have to choose between one or the other. But I do feel really lucky in that I've gotten to experience a lot of different places and ecosystems.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe I like that you say not a cold water person yet. You're open to it, which is fantastic.
Hopefully I'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's it from me. I want to
I yeah, if anyone wants to ask a question, just put your hand up or just jump in. There's not many of us. Peyton, I was just going to ask, yeah, I think you mentioned before, but the Footprints Running Camp is coming to Australia. A couple of good friends of For Wild Places are involved in that. But to help drive a bit of interest, I wonder, could you tell us a bit about what the Footprints Running Camp's about?
Yeah, so Footprints, at least in the beginning, it was really focused on creating solutions to different environmental problems. But now Dakota and Nate have expanded it a bit to be like basically anyone's passion project. You want to find a solution to any problem in the world, or you want to, yeah, basically just follow your passion and you think that it will help people in some way, like you are welcome to come to this camp. And it's a very fun camp. So it's been in Silverton for the past couple of years, and I'm really excited to know that Dakota is expanding it to a bunch of different locations. So a lot of people have opportunities to experience it, but it's like this really, honestly, sort of intense, like emotionally intense experience, because by the end of the week, usually spending about a week with people, and we've been in like this sort of remote cabin-esque setting, but you're spending a week with people, like as a mentor at least, constantly asking people what their passions are, what do they care about. You're being really vulnerable with each other, and you're also running together, which I think is really beautiful as well. Like you get to have all of these different ways to connect with people, and there's like very limited access to cell phones and internet, so even more of a way to get people better connected with each other. But yeah, I think it's a really beautiful experience, and I've made a lot of friends, I would say, throughout the process of being a mentor. And yeah, I think like Dakota is such an inspiring person, and the fact that he came up with the idea for this camp is amazing. And I think like everyone should have an opportunity to be a part of it. I'm super excited that it's coming to Australia. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. We Hill, I'm sure it's possible we can chuck a link in the YouTube description when the video goes up.
definitely. And I think yeah, you need to work out how you can get on the next camp and go
when is the Australia one?
There's one in April, and then I think they're planning one for later on in the year as well. So I think, yeah, there'll definitely be appetite to have more and it sounds like there is in the States as well. And there's so many places that you could have it. I know that the first one they're having in Victoria, not far from Melbourne, where they want to create a huge national park that encompasses a lot of existing parks. So the solutions that they come up are going to be around that particular area, and like native forest logging is still a big issue in here.
Yeah.
So that'll be really focusing on that one issue, which will be great to have more people, I guess, yeah, coming up with more creative out of the box ideas about that. I was keen to know, like, how did you find being a mentor? Because it must be, I guess, you've been a student yourself at uni and studying to then kind of, be on the other side of that and working with people in that setting where it is quite like you kind of, I feel like in that setting, you just cut through the bullshit and it's straight to like the gold in terms of what are you passionate about? What do you love? What do you want to do? Like how was the first experience for you? doing that?
Yeah. I would say, well, I'm not generally a person that is very I don't want to say straightforward. I don't know. I'm not a person that's like immediately going to ask you really intense questions. I think, and I'm not extremely extroverted or anything. So, yeah, the first time being a mentor was really different for me. And it was also like I was still in my PhD as well, and didn't really consider myself an expert or a way to, or like have, yeah, I guess have the right expertise to be in the mentorship or leadership capacity. So that was a new experience for me, but I think it was really good and honestly very empowering. And through the process of asking my mentees a lot of the questions that I was asking about, like, what are you passionate about? Where do you want this project to go? I was actually able to like reflect and think on my own passion projects and things that yeah, questions that I needed to ask myself as well. Because usually you don't get the chance to like look yourself in the face to be like, okay, and now you listen up.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what's good thing about this camp is, and when you tell someone, you're giving them advice, and then you're like, I probably should take my own advice and
Yeah, like, oh, I didn't know it
actually
was that
reflect on what I'm
insightful.
doing. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
can be quite confronting, but then a good opportunity to do that. Because like you said, we kind of, and I feel like post-COVID, like that's where holidays and going away on a break is so important, because you kind of disconnect from work and all that. And then you realize, I love this lifestyle of, I'm doing the things I love. Why don't I do more of this instead of just 2 weeks of the year? Like there's 52 weeks in a year. And yeah, so we need that chance to like disconnect and actually like have time to think about these things. Because I feel like if we're just busy all the time, you don't actually stop and think, what am I doing with my time? And is it the best use of my time? And am I actually, I don't know, putting my money where my mouth is, so to speak?
yeah. No, I totally agree. It's definitely a really good time for self-reflection for everyone at the camp, which is really awesome. And the collective energy that is developed throughout the camp is like very intense. And then everyone goes home being really sad that they have to leave each other. So um, somehow every single year there ends up being a really great group of people that just like mesh well together, and yeah, it works out really well.
We've still got a bit of time left. Peyton, do you mind if I ask about you ran in the Olympic trials in 2020, I think.
Sure.
What was that experience like?
It was interesting. It was fun for a little bit. Then well, I just remember the beginning of the race was really exciting, and I'm from Atlanta, which is where the trials were held, so it was nice because I had a lot of family there. And my like, you're basically, every runner can be represented by high school, so seeing like all these local high school groups, and that was really fun. And like even saw some people from my old high school, and that was just cool to like put it all in perspective. But the race itself was wild. It was like super windy. So my first memory of the start of the race was like we started, and then within the first mile, you just see like random cardboard boxes flying everywhere and literally hitting runners and like hitting spectators. And it was so crazy. It was like you're in this really packed street full of runners, and I'm trying to skirt around the sides instead of being clogged in the middle, and I'm just seeing people get whacked by these boxes. So that was really wild. And then like the middle part of the race was really fun, and then it was like mile 18, I started feeling some pain in my foot and ankle, and I had actually dislocated a bone in my ankle during the race because there were these really sharp hairpin turns on the course. And so I was like running on it until I think mile 21 or 22. And then I finally stopped and walked like 5 separate times because I like couldn't handle running on it and was going through a really emotional time. And yeah, and before that I was on track to PR and ran like 2:35 or something, which would have been crazy because that course was just horrific. And yeah, so basically I finished and I still PR'd, but it was only by like 3 seconds, and it was just hilarious because I was like limping in and not having a good time. But
You
like,
PR'd with an injury and with flying cardboard boxes hitting you.
yeah, yeah. But there was a lot of camaraderie around how miserable that race was. So like no one had a good time. And but we were all suffering together, so it was fun. Yeah. I haven't run a marathon since.
Yeah.
But
Oh, really?
yeah, but that will change this year. So
That's exciting. Yeah, what are you planning for 2023, Peyton? What are you most excited for, and have you picked some places or races or goals?
yeah, I feel like I actually have a decent race calendar for once, which is exciting. Because I'm generally like, I still feel like I'm very new to trail running. So I think I'm still trying to figure out what all the cool big races are, and also find things that are within my means of being able to participate in. But I found, so there's a US 50K road championship that's happening in March in New York. And basically if I do well, and well means like win it or get a qualifying time for the US team, then I would make the US team, and the team would go to Worlds in South Africa in May, which would be really cool. So I think that's like one of my biggest goals for the year. And then I have a couple of qualifying races for UTMB that I'm trying. And then I'm going to try to get a marathon qualifying time.
Exciting.
Sounds epic.
We just got a question from Al. I'll just, we'll just keep waiting a second.
Can't offer you water virtually, unfortunately.
I felt the same, Hill. I felt like going, here, can I?
Oh, there we go. She's sorted. Are you okay?
Sorry, this happens all the time. I literally just choke on air. It's so dry here.
Oh. The adjustment continues.
Oh dear.
Does that happen on runs?
Living in elevation.
Oh, that would suck.
No, I feel like that happens to me as well. You just breathing, and all of a sudden you're just like, I'm an adult. I should be able to do this without choking. But
I always do the opposite. I have a drink of water and it goes down the wrong pipe, and I'm like, that's all.
That happens to me too. Okay, I think I'm all settled.
we're good.
Sorry.
Well, we can wind up at any time if you need to.
No, I'm good. Let's get to Eleanor's question.
Yeah, so Elle was asking, how do you deal with injury from a mental point of view? And secondly, how good are you at listening to your body and actually taking time off to let your body heal and recover? Is that difficult, or does it come naturally?
I feel like, well, the biggest injuries I've had have been Achilles issues and tendonitis in my knee. And both of those were pretty chronic injuries. So I guess in the beginning of the injury, thinking that it was just going to be like a short-lived thing was difficult to get through, to like understand, to make the transition from, okay, this isn't short-lived, this is something that I have to deal with and like rehab constantly, was pretty difficult. But once you sort of go over that hump and realize like at least for me, what I realized was there are different imbalances in my body that need to be strengthened. And so in a way, those injuries were highlighting those imbalances, and the rehab that I was doing was going to overall help me in the end, like help me be a stronger runner and stronger human. So I think sort of switching that mindset for me was really, really helpful. And then how good am I at listening to my body and taking time off? I feel like I'm sort of a wimp when it comes to any sort of pain related to injury. So I'm really good at taking time off. So like any sort of inkling of pain or soreness that I feel on my Achilles, for example, like I know for that particular injury, you're still supposed to load it, like you're still supposed to load the tendon, but I won't do any super intense workouts or anything. Like I'll continue running, but it will be very easy, and I'll just continue to do a lot of strength work. And then in terms of the knee issue, it was more like I had to actually take some time off to give myself that time. And that was totally fine, because like you can find other things to do with your body usually when you have different injuries, or if you have an injury where you absolutely can't move your body in any way. I think that those are probably very mentally tough to get through, but there's always something you can do, maybe not physically, but in another outlet, like exploring your creativity in some way, like just doing something different that could get you on a different mental track, would ultimately help. And I would say, I don't think that did come naturally to me. I think it did take time for me to have, to sort of change that mindset, like I said. And every time I feel any sort of ounce of pain, I'm honestly like, oh no, it's the end of my career. But when you like take a step back, you're like, okay, everything is fine. You didn't completely break something. You didn't like completely tear something. Your body knows how to heal itself, and it's just going to take time. And I think you have to be really patient with your body and your mind, to be able to deal with these injuries.
That's awesome advice. Thanks, Peyton. Just wondering, when you say chronic, how long is chronic? Like couple months, couple years?
Like, so my knee injury, basically when I found out that I had this injury, the doctor told me that I was going to have it for the rest of my life. Like, I would feel some pain for the rest of my life unless I was constantly doing strength exercises. It's not totally true, but I do feel some knee pain when I haven't done like some of the typical lower body rehab that I would do. And then for the Achilles injury, chronic is usually like a couple years. And my Achilles injury, I was lucky enough in that I didn't completely tear it. Whereas like if that happens, then you have to have surgery. And once you have surgery, you pretty much lose most of the elasticity in your tendon. And so it can be really difficult to come back. And I think in that case, it would be a lot longer. But like my Achilles issue I had last year, and sometimes I'll still feel it when I haven't been doing my like typical calf raises or like loading my tendon in different ways.
Quick question on that, like what kind of what I guess now you're in Boulder, I'm sure there's plenty of other activities and sports you can do. Like what's I guess your favorite kind of cross training activities in summer and then winter? Like you said before we started that you're learning how to ski, which is excellent workout. But yeah, what do you enjoy doing when you're not running?
Yeah, I mean, now dancing.
Now you're a
really
hip hop
into
superstar.
Now I'm a hip hop dancer. But yeah, like other forms of dance too, I'm really into. But yeah, I think I've actually been really excited about skiing in particular because like I now know what people mean who like people who live in really wintry, snowy places where it's like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess you could run year round, but that would be miserable. Because I have found it like really hard to motivate myself to go run on super snowy trails every single day. Like that's just sort of hard on your body. But it does help strengthen you a lot. But like skiing helps motivate me a bit more to get out in the cold. And you're going a little bit faster in some cases, and it's just like fun, and you're using different muscles in your body, which I think is, yeah, that just has been really fun for me. And then in the summer, I was doing a bit of climbing, which was new for me. I'm not a good climber, but but I enjoyed it. So that's been pretty fun. And then I was always pretty into swimming, and I think that that's been like the most difficult thing to do here because yeah, like main places you can go swim are pools, and I'm not a big pool person. I like open water, and the open water we have here, at least in Boulder proper, is this reservoir, and you should not swim in the reservoir at all. It's pretty gross. Like I had a friend who was training for this like triathlon thing in the Grand Tetons, and I was like, what was the visibility like in the reservoir? And he was like, it was nothing but bird poop and murkiness. Bird poop, cow poop. And you like could only see a couple inches in front of you. And he said he ran into so many birds. Like so, yeah. It's like that does not sound very fun.
Enjoyable at all. Or very healthy. I feel like you'd end up getting like some weird disease after.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been exciting to like explore more of the mountain activities for sure.
Excellent. And on that note, yes, on that note, let's end on the mountain activities, not the bird poop.
Better. Yeah.
I feel like we could chat all day, Peyton, but we kind of do these for roughly an hour, so we should wind up. Before we do, I'd just like to give a plug for Wild Places. Any folks having a look on YouTube, check us out for wildplaces.com or on Insta, and check out the membership page. We just launched a membership program. Oh man, time flies. I don't know, several months ago. I can't remember exactly when. And it'd be great if you could join up, because all the income from membership just goes straight into helping us do what we do, organize events like the Pilliga Ultra, and make sure we're a sustainable organization. So check that out. And yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in, and especially a big thanks to Peyton for joining us. Peyton, thanks so much, and I hope you have a rockin' 2023.
Thanks. So yeah, thanks for having me. This has been really fun.
We look forward to seeing you at the Footprints camp. Maybe not this year, but definitely next time. We've got plenty of beautiful ocean to explore as well, and a few mountains. But we think they're mountains, but you probably won't think they can.
And there's only minimal bird poo in the ocean.
Perfect. That's all I need to know. Also, I count literally anything as a mountain as more of a flat lander person. So yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that's good. You'll fit right in. Where like it doesn't take much for us to be like, oh, that's a mountain.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Peyton. It was great to hear more from you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.
Guys. Thank you.